I published a video a while back about a automation I put in place that I call quote of the day. And so now I've decided to build on that just a little bit. And what I've done is I've built a little interface on top of this automation. And so what I can do is make calls to the automation via a webhook, and then trigger the automation and actually send the automation input. So here I'm sending it a message, and so I'm trying to say, hey, when you develop this quote, use this as the basis. Attitude is everything. So that's the example here. And so what it does is it's just really a quick refresher on the automation. This just sets some variables. Here we're going to message an assistant that's sitting in OpenAI that generates these quotes. So we've got different layers to this architecture here, and we're going to look at that in just a little bit. So after you get your quote, we're going to fire that off to another OpenAI. This is a DALL-E task that is going to generate an image based on the quote that gets generated from this previous step. And then we're going to get that file. We're going to add a row to a spreadsheet and give it the information about the file that we've got for the image as well as the quote. Put that information into a Google Sheet. We're going to upload that to S3 so we can have external access to the image. And then we're going to send back to the webhook what we've done. So we give it the quote text that we send back in the image URL. So we're going to take a look at what this looks like. So here is the bot that I put in place. So I've got a chat bot that's interfacing with that webhook. And it can do a couple of things here. It can generate a new quote, or it can view an existing quote. So we're going to try this first. All the view existing quote is going to go and grab that Google Sheet, and we're going to send it. In this case, we're just going to generate a random number within the sheet and return an image from a random place in the spreadsheet, a random row. So now it's making a call to that webhook, and it's going to return back with the quote as well as the URL for the image, and it's going to display it right here in the chatbot. So here you go. There's the quote, there's the image. And then we've got another function here where it's going to call another webhook that we just looked at to generate a new quote. And so here it's got to ask me, hey, give me some inspiration for the quote. What do you want me to base the quote on? So we'll just say attitude and see what it comes up with. We just give it a one-word phrase. Now this takes usually about 25-30 seconds to generate, so it's got to wait because it's waiting for the data to come back, both the text and the URL to the image that we're generating. And I did have to work with the chatbot provider in this case to extend the timeout because their default timeout was not long enough for this. We do need about 35 seconds or so for this. So here's our quote. Your attitude is like a paintbrush. It colors your world. So if you want a masterpiece, start by splashing a little positivity on the canvas of your day. And here's our image. So that's what we got. That's how it's working. We're going to take a look at the architecture as I said. So what we've got here is we've got a chatbot interface that we're doing using this Chatling. I've also fooled around a little bit with BotPress to do this as well. Works very similar. It's just a little bit easier in Chatling to interface with the webhook, and I'll show you that in just a sec. Then we're calling those make automations, and then we've got our OpenAI assistant. And so we've got two different automations in place. We've got the one that generates the quote, which is down here where we looked at that in detail, and then this is the one that gets a random quote. And so what it's doing is it just receives the webhook, it looks inside the spreadsheet, gets the number of rows, and then it generates a random number of the number of rows. So if there's 100 rows in the sheet, it's going to give us a row between 1 and 100, and then it's going to go back to the sheet, get that row, and then return that back to the webhook that called it. So that's what we got, and this is just the screens that we were just looking at with some examples, but we went through that already in detail. Now let's take a look at the actual bot in Chatling, and this is it. So we just came in, we've got a form that says, hey, what would you like to do? Generate a new quote, and then it calls one webhook, or if we want to view an existing quote, and it calls the other webhook. And then in both cases, it displays the response in a, they call these cards. So we have our quote text and our quote URL. And then we've just got an error card here. So the last thing I want to show you guys is how we're passing the parameters. So here we've got our webhook call. So that's just our make.com webhook. We're sending it a message. So these are what parameters that we can send in. So we're sending message, and this is a variable in Chatling. So it's mapped to what someone entered here for generate when we ask them for the information inside this capture input. So we've got a capture text. That's what they're entering in the message. We typed in attitude. So then we've got our response, and so we're pulling back, and these are things that are getting returned from the webhook. The quote text and the image URL are in a JSON structure, and we're putting those into variables inside the chatbot that can be displayed, and that's what's just here. So we can flip back really quick to the webhook, and as you can see here, this is how we're passing that the information. So we tell it it's content type application JSON, and then we're giving it the JSON structure, and we're passing back our quote text and the full URL to the image. So that's what I got. Interesting little project to work on. I think this holds a lot of potential for other things. You know, basically what we're doing here is putting user interfaces on top of our automations, and I think it's a very powerful combination.